Thank you. I'm going to back up for just one moment. Where was that spot? To lines 10:15 and following. Take that back, 10:17. This is after Beowulf has killed Grendel. It's before the Finnsburg episode. And the poet kind of gives us this image. You know, here's the hall. At the center of the hall sits Hrothgar. Okay? Across from him sit his sons, Hrethric, Hrothmund. His wife, Wealhtheow, is kind of flitting around. Hrothulf, his nephew, sits over here. And Unferth kind of sits at his feet, all right? And the poet tells us, fairly those, line 10:14, fairly those kinsmen took many a full mead cup, stout-hearted in the high hall, Hrothgar and Hrothulf. Heorot within was filled with friends. No false treacheries did the people of the Scyldings plot at that time. And you've got a footnote and says, implicit in this statement is the idea that at some point later, the people of the Scyldings did give false testimonies, did plot false treacheries. From other sources, it's possible to infer that after the death of Hrothgar, his nephew Hrothulf ruled rather than Hrethric. That is, in those other sources, in Old Norse material, we're told Hrothulf will usurp the throne. See, the way the throne is usually passed on in Germanic fashion, father, eldest son. Eldest son here is Hrethric. Yeah, Hrethric. And these other sources indicate that Hrothulf is going to take the throne. Okay? And that it's taken violently. And that's also implied, some argue, it's also implied at the scene where, they have the ribbon cutting grand opening ceremony for Heorot. And we're told that, right as the ribbon is being cut, so to speak, what is going to happen in the distant future to Heorot? It's going to suffer from fires. And the fires are going to be caused by in-laws. All right? Hrothgar's daughter's husband will eventually come and the hall will be burnt down. Why is that, that little allusion there significant as well as this here? Well, what are they going to sing about in less than 100 lines? Okay, first of all, what are both those instances talking about? At the beginning of the poem, when Heorot is finished in its construction, this is lines. '81 and following. The hall towered high and horn-gabled. It awaited hostile flames, the surges of war. The time was not yet at hand when the sword hate of sworn in-laws should arise after ruthless violence. Okay, you get that, and then you get this passage that we just talked about, 10:14 and following, with Hrothulf being discussed, and in what's going to be sung about, beginning 1070 and following. The Finnsburg fragment, or the Finnsburg episode. Okay? They're all about family feud. Internecine warfare. Okay? Internecine within the blood, within the family. Right? The first one is in-laws. The second one is uncle to son, uncle to nephew. Okay? The third one is both, the Finnsburg fragment, is both in-laws and uncle to son, because of the fact that Knaf and his nephew apparently kill each other. They are burned on the same funeral pyre. And a lot of us think that what that really means is that they killed each other, okay, in this battle. So you have the combination there of the in-laws, which is kind of, distant family, so to speak, but then uncle to nephew, that's that really, really close bond. So you have this seemingly get emphasized again and again and again. Where else do we see that in the poem? Cain and Abel. Right? The first murder is what? Within the family. It's a family feud, so to speak. Cain is pissed off because Abel's sacrifice, Abel's offering is blessed by God, and his isn't. Okay? That gives rise to Grendel. They have the opening ceremony for Herod. Songs are being sung about creation. I still think, I always tell my graduate students and undergraduate students, I kind of think the song, as it's described, it's Cadman's hymn. That it sounds like it's being sung. And notice, Grendel doesn't like it. Why? Because Grendel is in a feud with God. So, quit the God singing, and it'll be fine. But they won't quit the God singing. And that drives Grendel to come. All right? So, jump forward a little bit. Fit 16. Sorry. Fit 16 in line 1055. So we find out Hrothgar is going to pay the Were-Guild, which means man price or man gold, if you want, for the death of Beowulf's man that Grendel killed, right? Because remember, think of the hall again. Shaped like this, you got a door here, maybe a door here. When Beowulf and his men camp in the night for Grendel to come, how do they position themselves? They're kind of like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Whatever. Lost my count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 14, too many. Like this. Grendel comes in. Where's Beowulf? If you're familiar with the Harry Potter novels, in the first book, when Harry starts getting letters, and Uncle Vernon won't let him read them, what does he finally try to do, like the second or third day? He lays down in front of the door. He figures, I'm going to be right here for when the letters come. What should Beowulf do if he's going to kill Grendel when Grendel first arrives? Put a big old bee right there in front of the door. So when Grendel comes in, there's Beowulf. What can't he not do, though, if he's the first one to meet Grendel? He can't see how Grendel goes about his business. He can't watch Grendel's modus operandi. So, what does that mean necessarily? Let's use the Latin ipso facto. One of these guys is what? Expendable. So it's like, no, Hanchu, you take the seat by the door. You take the bed. Okay? And Beowulf watches Grendel come up and rip the guy to pieces and stuff him in his bag. And then Grendel reaches down for Beowulf, and Beowulf reaches back up, and the battle begins. So, that's why Hrothgar is paying the man price, paying the cost for the death of Beowulf's men. Then we get, he would have done more. This is the part I wanted to get to. If wise God and one man's courage had not prevented that fate. Okay, now who is speaking here? Notice there are no quotation marks. There is no so-and-so said. This is the narrator. Okay? This time period, narrators were always reliable. You gotta get that 20th century, 19th century mindset out of your mind that, oh, I don't know that I can trust the narrator, whether or not the narrator is telling me the truth. Narrators reflect the truth, right? So, Grendel, would have done more if wise God and one man's courage had not prevented that fate. So notice, God was at work and one man's courage was at work. The Maker ruled all of the race of mankind. Notice the verb tense. The Maker ruled. When? Well, when is everything poem, when is everything in the poem set? In Yeardagum, in the days of yore. That's why the speaker says, ruled. And then the speaker says what? As he still does. And that brings us right to the present of the speaker of the poem speaking to his direct audience, whenever that direct audience is. Okay, now think about this for a moment. Think about it in terms of dates of composition and who the audience could be. If the poem is an early date, 700 or so, then the audience is very newly Christian, so to speak. But if it's late date, the audience has been Christian for generations. Okay. If it's 700 or so, there's relative peace. That is, they're not being troubled by the Vikings and such. But if it's in the late 10th century, they are being troubled by Vikings. And that means what? You got these Vikings marauding, raping, pillaging, burning, stealing. And God still rules, is what the speaker is saying. Okay? So you gotta think of, okay, so what does that imply? It's kind of like we're in the book of Job, where all this crap happens. And Job keeps acknowledging God's in control. It doesn't mean Job's happy. Read the book of Job. Job is by no means one of these, oh, everything's good, God loves me, have a smile on my face. It's not what the book of Job's about. Therefore, okay, so the speaker says, the narrator says, the Maker ruled all of the race of mankind as he still does. Therefore means what? The very next word. Here's the lesson to be learned. If this were Aesop, it would be, and here's the moral of the story. Therefore, understanding is always best. And then we get that word understanding replaced with an appositive. That is, the appositive is now going to supply additional information about that word understanding. Spiritual foresight. Foresight, not prophecy, okay? But seeing into the deeper meanings of things and seeing, kind of looking ahead. So what's the spiritual foresight? What do you learn from this lesson? He must face much. Both love and hate. That's the much. You got to face much. Face meaning what? Confront. When you go face to face, it means head on. Okay? So you have to confront much love and hate. Who, and this is going back to the he, who long here endures this world. What is that? 1062. Who long here endures this world in these days of strife. Interestingly, the word that's used for endures is brooketh, from which we get modern English brooks. Not brooks as in babbling brooks. It's a word that we no longer use in this old meaning. Okay? Like, I will brook no argument. That means, and you see that if you read 19th century and earlier literature, like novels and such, you'll see that kind of phrase used by somebody who's essentially saying, silence. I'm not going to allow any discontent or any dissent, or I'm not going to enjoy. See, brooketh in Old English really means enjoys. He who long here enjoys the world in these days of strife. Okay? This idea is very much like the idea expressed throughout the Wanderer, right? The Wanderer says what? Count no one wise until he's lived his share of winters. Hrothgar is going to say the same thing in a few moments. Any of you know, by the way, how Sophocles' Oedipus the King ends? In terms of what it says about joy or happiness in life? It ends with the chorus saying, count no man happy. Another translation is blessed. Count no man happy until what? Until he is dead. In other words, you don't get happiness here. The happiness comes on the release. Okay? So, the Maker ruled all of the race of mankind as he still does. Therefore, understanding is always best. Spiritual foresight. Here's the spiritual foresight. He must face much both love and hate, who long here endures this world in these days of strife. Embedded right there, about a third of the way in the poem, is this idea that life here involves what? One of my favorite films, some people consider one of the best films of all time. Life is pain, Highness. One of the characters tells, the princess in The Princess Bride. Life is pain. Okay? If you learn that early, the speaker is saying, then it becomes less painful. So, what then do they immediately do? We go to the Finnsburg episode, which is all about what? Pain and suffering and agony and family feud, right? That ends, fit 17, and Wealhtheow comes forward. Right-hand column, line 1162 and following. She comes forward in her golden crown and such, and starts passing the mead cup around. Her name, Wealhtheow. We saw this component with Beowulf's father's name, Edgetheow, servant of the edged sword. This is Wealhtheow. The word well means foreign or exile. Anybody know what modern English word we get from it? Louder? Welsh. Wales. The country named Wales means foreigners, exiles. The Welsh do not call themselves the Welsh. They don't consider themselves to be foreigners or exiles. They are the Cymry, and they live in, and I probably got these backwards because I always do, Cymru. That's the name of the land in Gaelic. In Welsh Gaelic, but you can't use the word Welsh to describe her. So her name means foreign servant, foreign slave. Nearly everyone reads her name as indicating that she was married to Hrothgar to buy peace between their two tribes. Okay? She is a bride peace. P-E-A-C-E, not P-I-E-C-E. Right? The poem doesn't actually state that about Wealhtheow. So she comes in, and we're told she comes to where, line 1163, the good two sat, nephew and uncle. And we get back to that tableau, that image that is portrayed for us. Okay? Their peace was still whole then, each true to the other. What does the still and then imply? It's not going to stay that way. That they are not going to be true to each other. Okay? Likewise, and now the poet specifically directs our attention. Likewise, Unferth, spokesman, the word that's used there is Thula, okay, which means kind of like press secretary, the person who speaks on behalf of the king, but it also implies in this context the person who retains the memory of the people. I mean, he's not only the press secretary, but he's the national historian, so to speak. You know? He what? He sat at the foot of the shielding Lord. So again, think of that image. So we have Hrothgar, Hrothulf, Hrethric, Hrothmund, Unferth at Hrothgar's feet, and right between Hrethric and Hrothmund, Beowulf. Okay? So we're told, Unferth sits at the Lord's feet. Everyone trusted his spirit. Again, who's the speaker? It's our reliable narrator. Okay? Everyone trusted his spirit, that he had great courage. Okay? Everyone trusted that he had great courage. Though to his kinsmen he had not been merciful in sword play. That's kind of litotes. What does it mean he hadn't been merciful in sword play? What did Beowulf accuse Unferth of? Kinslaying. Remember that fourfold dramatic ethic by C.L. Rand from the Study of Old English? Number 1, duty to your Lord. Number 2, duty to your kin. Number 3, duty to avenge your Lord and kin. And number 4, kind of a reliance, trust in fate. Weird, right? Well, part of that duty to your Lord, duty to your kin, duty to revenge is about the worst crime you could commit is to slay a member of your own family. Okay? And that takes us back to where? Notice the first murder isn't us versus them. It's us versus us. Okay? That's kind of like interior, killing myself in a sense, right? So, notice we're told, all the people trusted Unferth. Beowulf is the one who points out, he's a kinslayer. Okay? And now the poet, the speaker of the poem, confirms the words that Beowulf said. I mean, you could have thought Beowulf is just blowing smoke. He's just going out there and saying stuff, trying to see what sticks. But now the speaker of the poem confirms, no, he really is a kinslayer. Okay, pause for a moment. So, if he's a kinslayer, notice where he sits. And think of the hall as being the center of society. Where's Unferth? Bullseye. What does that say about that society? There's a phrase from Hamlet. Something's rotten in the state of Denmark. Okay. Think of when Grendel comes. The narrator says, he bore God's ira. He bore God's ire. Is this bearing of God's ire because of the position of Unferth? Because Hrothgar has put his trust, his reliance in a kinslayer, and therefore the entire kingdom is kind of rotting from within? I don't know. It's a theory. So, she comes in and she says, take this cup, my noble, courteous lord. She offers it to Hrothgar. Be truly joyful, gold friend of men. Speak to the Geats in mild words as a man should do. Be gracious to the Geats, mindful of the guests. In other words, just lavish them with treasure and everything. But then what does she say? 1175. I have been told that you would take this warrior for your son. What did Hrothgar literally say? Anyone remember? I will love you like a son in my heart. He didn't say, let's draw up the adoption papers. Or let's draw up the legal guardianship papers. Probably for one reason. One, it's anachronistic. A second reason, Beowulf's too old. He's not a child. Okay? But notice how she puts this. I have been told. What does that mean? She might have been told wrongly. Somebody might have lied to her. This is Wealhtheow speaking, not the narrator of the poem. Wealhtheow is not omniscient. The narrator of the poem generally is. The narrator of the poem knows where things are going and such. Okay? I've been told you're going to take this warrior as your son. And she kind of does this. Look around you, Lord. Herod is cleansed. Right? Grendel's dead. He's not coming back. So, use your many rewards while you can. And leave to your kinsmen the folk and kingdom. Now, you can interpret that to mean that she says, give them all the treasure you want. That is Beowulf. Give Beowulf all the treasure you want. But leave to your kinsmen her two sons. What? The people and the kingdom. She's not talking slavery. She's not saying the people are our slaves and belong to us. She's saying the people and the kingdom, because that's really one thing, right? You don't have a kingdom without people. I mean, if you go and you find a deserted island and you set up yourself as, I'm king of the island, what does that really mean? Nothing. Okay? Because you do everything still. When you must go forth to face the Maker's decree, that is, judgment. I know that my own dear gracious Hrothulf, wait. She was talking about Beowulf. I've been told you're going to adopt him. But then she talks about Hrothulf. Why doesn't she say, I know that my own dear gracious Beowulf, he'll repay our sons if you... No. She immediately turns to him. That he will hold and honors these youths. these youths, what's she telling us about her sons? They're young. They're not of majority age. They're not adults. They still need to be cared for. So she's saying, I know that if you and I kick the bucket, Hrolf, for honors, she says, will hold these youths. I expect he would wish to repay both our sons kindly, if he recalls all the pleasures and honors we have shown him in our kindness since he was a child. And what she's talking about is, Hrolf has been fostered here. Fostered like a foster child. They have raised him as their own. Why? Because in Germanic literature, this is how a king learns as a child how to be a king. He gets raised by his relative who is a king. And that king teaches him how to be a king. So that's why Hrolf is being raised here. And she's saying, if you die before he does, he will remember all the kindnesses, all the things we did for him. He'll remember it for what? And he'll repay our children. She's assuming in these words, if we take them at their literal level, then he has a good heart. And that he wants to repay our sons. Right? She turned to the bench where her boys sat, Hrethric and Hralfman, and the son of heroes, all the youths together, the good man, Beowulf the Geat, sat between the two brothers. Now that makes it sound like Beowulf is what age? Close to these two. But he's not. He clearly isn't. Okay? Now, that's the literal level of reading those lines. Is there a subtext? Is there another way to interpret what she is saying? Because notice she addresses Hrolf, and then what does she do? She turns to the two boys and Beowulf. See, I think, and I'm not in the majority opinion here, though I haven't published this. I've discussed it on an Anglo-Saxon listserv that all the major Anglo-Saxons of the world used to be on, at least. It's gone wildly, crazily political, and a lot of people have left it in the last 20 years. I brought up the idea she's being entirely, how do I put this, sarcastic in these lines. So if she's being sarcastic, what is she really saying about Hrolf? When she says, I expect he would wish to repay both our sons kindly, if he recalls, what she really mean? I don't trust him. Especially when that comes kind of in the context of what else has been said in the poem about Hrothgar and Hrolf's relationship. And especially read in light of that other literary tradition that says Hrolf is going to try to usurp the throne. Okay? So, she comes forward and she gives Beowulf treasure. Hrothgar has given Beowulf treasure, right? Gave him a whole bunch of stuff. So now she's going to. And we're told, 1195 and following, she gives him the greatest neck collar ever heard of anywhere on earth. Neck collar, we would call it probably a torque, T-O-R-C. Get online and look for something like, British Museum, T-O-R-C, and you'll see all kinds of pictures of these things. And it's a collar that is open at one end, so it's shaped like a U, or an O with a part open, that you can pull, open, and close. Made out of wound wire together, gold, okay, that you wear around your neck. It's a sign or symbol of kingship. Beowulf is going to give one of these to somebody at the end of the poem. And when he does, he's indicating to that person, you're king now. All right? So she gives this thing, and the poet tells us, this is the greatest neck ring since Hama carried off to the bright city the Browsinga necklace. major illusion that we don't really know what it's referring to. Other than that, it's carried, and this is a necklace of the gods. Okay? So this necklace is compared to that one. And we get what's called the first Frisian raid illusion, or digression. Digression, not illusion. Okay? Lines 432, lines 1202 through 1214 is the first reference to Hielan's Frisian raid. There are going to be 3 of them within the poem. Okay? This is the shortest, if I remember correctly, of the 3. Why? Because we are told Hielan wears this ring around his neck when he goes off and raids the Frisians and dies. And the ring gets captured by the Frisians. Okay? Why did he go raid the Frisians? Line 1205. Fate struck him down when in his pride he went looking for woe, a feud with the Frisians. Okay? Hielan creates, he opens a feud. His name, by the way, often translated, Hija means mind, thought. Lack can be lack. It can also be gift. Most people don't think he means, gifted mind. It means the other, lack thought, lack mind. Like, not the brightest. Okay? So, she then addresses Beowulf. Notice what the poet does there. We get the neck ring mentioned, then we get Hielan's Frisian raid, and then we get her words giving the neck ring to Beowulf. Beowulf, beloved warrior, wear this neck ring in good health, enjoy this war garment, treasure of the people, prosper well, be bold and clever. And then what does she do? And to these boys, my sons, okay, be bold and clever. And to these boys, be mild in counsel. I will remember you for that. You have made it so that men will praise you far and near, forever and ever, as wide as the seas, home of the winds, surround the shores of earth. Be while you live blessed, O noblemen. I wish you well with these bright treasures. Be to my sons kind in your deeds, keeping them in joys. Now, between her words to Hrothgar, 1169, and the conclusion of her speech, 1187, and these words to Beowulf, how much time passes? Just a few minutes. At most. Why? Because everything from 1192 through 1215 is happening, so to speak, where? In the mind of the speaker of the poem. That is, she addresses Hrothgar and Hrothulf, and then brings the cup, passes it around, and the poet tells us, and she brings out the neck ring. How long does that take? A few seconds. And the poet tells us, while she has this neck ring and is making her way towards Beowulf, oh, by the way, this is the neck ring that Hielan wore on his last. And then she gets to Beowulf and presents him with the ring. So probably a minute or two at the most. It's simultaneous with what came about Hrothulf, right? And she tells Beowulf to do what? Ultimately, be wise. Be to my sons kind in your deeds, keeping them in joys. She says, "To my boys, be mild in counsel. I will remember you for that." And then look what she says. Line 1228. "Here each earl is true to the other, mild in his heart, loyal to his liege lord, the thanes united, the nation alert, the troop, having drunk at my table, will do as I bid." So if everyone is of one mind and one, all full of peace, they love each other equally and all that kind of stuff, why is she saying, "Be kind to my sons in your deeds"? Does she think Beowulf is a threat? Or is she telling Beowulf, "Keep your eye on my boys. Watch over them. Protect them"? See, the way I read the poem is when she says, "Here each earl is true to the other," she looks at her nephew. Kind of like to go, "Not him. He's false," because the narrator has already told us there's something going on there. There's some bad blood. And how do we partially know that? Because of this whole tableau. What's at the center of it? Kinslayer. And there's an implication there will be a future kinslayer, because him killing him, that's kinslaying. They're cousins. All right? She goes and sits down. The men drink wine. They did not know weird. They did not know what will be, will be. Well, what will be? What's going to happen? The cruel fate which would come to pass for many an earl once evening came. Now that kind of sounds like what's going to happen. A bunch of people are going to get slaughtered. But they don't. Only one does. Right? So Hrothgar goes off to his bed with his wife. Beowulf goes and sleeps in another hall. Okay. Fit 19. They all fall asleep. One pays sorely for his evening rest. And then we get the description of Grendel's mother. Why weren't we told about Grendel's mother before? In fact, the next morning, Beowulf's going to go, "How'd you sleep, Hrothgar?" And he's going to say, "Shut up, Ashura died, blah, blah, blah." And Beowulf's kind of like, "You never said anything about two of them. I only heard about one monster." Okay. Look at line 1306, the second half. "Then the wise king, gray-bearded warrior, was grieved at heart when he learned that he no longer lived. The dearest of men, his chief thane, was dead." Beowulf comes in, next fit, asks how things are. Hrothgar, "Ask not of joys. Sorrow is renewed for the Danish people. Ashura is dead. Elder brother of Ermenlaf, my confidant, my counselor, my shoulder companion in every conflict, when we defended our heads, when the foot shoulders clashed and struck boar helmets, as a nobleman should be, always excellent, so Ashura is dead." And then he says, "Grendel's mother avenged the feud in which you killed Grendel yesterday." What has he just done? This is your fault, Beowulf. You opened up this feud with Grendel's mother. How? By closing the feud between Grendel and Hrothgar. In your violent way, with a crushing vice grip, for he had diminished and destroyed my people for far too long. And then he says, "Oh yeah, I've heard my people talk about seeing two of them go walking in the moors. One being slightly different only in the form of a woman." Okay. 1377. "You do not yet know this fearful place," that is the fearful place that Grendel and his mother come from, "where you might find the simple creature. Seek it if you dare. I challenge you, Beowulf." Go kill another monster. I will reward you with ancient riches for that feud, as I did before, with twisted gold if you return alive. He just challenged. It's like, on your honor, you make that kind of challenge and Beowulf's going to go through it. Notice how Beowulf replies. Sorrow not, wise one. Put that in modern English. What's he really mean? Suck it up, Hrothgar. Quit your belly aching. It is always better to avenge one's friend than to mourn over much. Strap on your sword, get on your horse, and go out there and kill some monster. You know what? Each of us must await the end of this world's life. Meaning, we all got to die. We all got to die sometime. Let him who can bring about fame before death. That is best for the unliving man after he is gone. What do you have left after you die? Beowulf suggests. There's only one thing. Fame. What do people say about you after you're dead? That's it. So, spend your life doing what? Glorious deeds. Okay? He says, come on, let's go. And we're told, line 1397, the old man leapt up. Thank the Lord, the mighty God. That is not pagan Germanic language. That is very Christian. For that man's speech. Hallelujah. That's what I hoped you'd say. Okay? So Beowulf goes off to Grendel's mere. What does he do this time that he didn't do in the fight against Grendel? Yeah, he straps everything on. Okay? He puts on his shield, his breastplate. He's got his shield. He's got a sword. He's got gauntlets on his arms, if we were thinking later medieval armor and stuff. He's got, if it were, 14th century, he's got greaves and everything on his legs. He's just like a walking tin man. Nothing's going to get through. All right? Why? Well, this battle's a little different. Plus, what did the poet tell us about Grendel? He didn't use a sword, and swords were useless against him. Okay? The language that's used is kind of enigmatic. It implies Grendel has spells woven about him to keep him from being killed with a sword. So, Fit 22. No, let's back up. Line 1455 and following. They get to the mere, and Unferth does what? He offers Beowulf his sword. We're told, not the smallest of powerful supports was that which Hrothgar's spokesman lent him in need. That hilted sword was named Hrunting, unique among ancient treasures. Its edge was iron, etched with poisoned stripes, hardened with the blood of war. It had never failed any man who grasped it in his hands in battle. Okay? The etched with poisoned stripes, that's not talking about literal, poison on it. That's talking about how the sword was constructed. It's called a pattern welded sword. So that when it's welded together, beat flat and everything, it's got these weaved patterns in the steel. Right? Truly the son of Edgelife did not remember what he had said before. That is, when he first challenged Beowulf and Beowulf arrived, why didn't he remember what he had said before? Because Beowulf says, wow, you said an awful lot, Unferth. Drunk with beer. Okay? And the poet makes pretty clear, one thing you can count on for the Danes, they're usually drunk at night. Every time somebody comes, every time they have a battle that they lose, it's after they are flush with beer. In fact, it's kind of implied that one of the reasons so many people get killed is because they don't even wake up when Grendel comes. They are dead to the world drunk, right? And he just gobbles them up. So Beowulf takes Hrunting, right? And Beowulf says to Hrothgar, 1488 or so, let Unferth have that ancient heirloom. What's that ancient heirloom? The sword you gave me, if I don't come back. What's that sword? That was Hrothgar's father's sword. Okay? And so Beowulf jumps in the water. And we're told, line 1495, it was the space of a day before he could perceive the bottom. The Old English is huilis dagum, if I remember correctly. Space of a day, 1495. No, huilis dagus. Yeah, huil. Huil dagus. Time of the day. It was a time of the day. That gets interpreted variously. Okay? Notice your gloss at the bottom. Or it was daylight. That is not what it means. The way most critics read that it was the greater part of a day. So what's the greater part of a day? If we take a day to be 24-hour time frame, what's the greater part? 12 hours and 1 minute. If we take that kind of literally. We can maybe take it more figuratively. It was a long time before Beowulf perceived the bottom. He jumps in the water, and it's several hours before he reaches the bottom. And he does that how? Shouldn't do that when you can't breathe. Telling us what? He's not like us. It's not that he has massive lung capacity. He's different. Okay? And he goes down, and Grendel's mother grabs him, and he fights with her. And let's see here. He strikes her with the sword, and the sword doesn't do any good. And we're told she trips him. Let's see here. Line 1544 and following, 1543. Weary, he stumbled, strongest of warriors, of foot soldiers, and took a fall. I think that's an example of Anglo-Saxon humor. He's called the strongest of foot warriors, and he trips. This would be like Muhammad Ali at the height of his boxing career when he's doing the rope-a-dope and dancing and talking about stinging like a, floating like a butterfly, stinging like a bee. And if he suddenly tripped on the floor, in a bout with George Foreman or something, it doesn't happen. But Beowulf trips, and she does what? We're told. She set upon her hall guest. Set comes from the Old English verb seton. Okay? The verb that's used here is set. Now, that is the past tense for seton. Okay? But it's also sat. Beowulf trips, and she plops her bum down on him. And she sits there, and she pulls out her little sword and goes, and starts trying to stab him. But his shirt of mail protects him. And we're told, he would have died had holy God not brought about that war victory. The wise Lord, ruler of the heavens, decided it rightly, easily, once he stood up. So did God decide it and then Beowulf stood up? Or did Beowulf stand up and then God decided it? It's unclear. The word once isn't once in the Old English. It's Sidon. And it can be interpreted because, or it can be interpreted after. So, does God decide it because Beowulf stands up? Or does Beowulf stand up because God decides it? Which comes first? And what does he do? We don't have time. We'll pick up with F23. And we've got to lose. Boy, we're away for a moment. A week from, did I say this? A week from Friday? A week from Friday, we're not going to have class because I'm having surgery on my knee a week from tomorrow. So I know we're going to